Animals are meant for us to depend on, but we always don't think that they matter that much. How important is wildlife conservation in the grander scheme of things?
If we to speak of creation, we are more important than the other creatures, but we must acknowledge that our very existence is also dependent on whether other ecosystems are thriving.
Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of our podcast, Driving Eco-Sustainability, My Perspective, and this is season 2. It's bigger, it's back, and it's better. And on this season, I'm happy to open it up with a person who also happens to be a personal friend, Johnson, one who works with the Uganda Wildlife Education Centre, a passionate conservationist, someone who has also founded an organization to advance this cause called Green Totos. So I am happy that you are here today. As you join us, we are going to delve into a conversation of how wildlife conservation can help to tackle the current climate crisis in Uganda and globally. Thank you so much. Welcome, Johnson. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Grace, and thank you for having me.
Share with us and our listeners and our guests and everyone who is going to watch us. Who is Johnson and what does he do and what drove you to join this space?
Thank you very much. Well, my name is Thembo Johnson Puruka, like you already mentioned. I'm a conservationist. I work with the Uganda Wildlife Education Centre as a conservation educator, but I'm also a co-founder at Green Totos Uganda, which is a youth-led organization that is championing environmental literacy and climate change education in schools and communities.
All right, thank you so much. So briefly take us through. Do you think it's important? This may seem a bit redundant. How important do you think it is to preserve our wildlife? Is wildlife welfare really that important? Because most times, most people, when we look at animals, out there, it's the leading cause of poaching. Most of us, or most people feel like animals are meant for us to depend on, but we always don't think that they matter that much. How important is wildlife conservation in the grander scheme of things?
Well, for starters, it's very important to note and acknowledge that as humans, we only part of the larger ecosystem on planet Earth. We are not solely the only creature on the planet, and I think that's the mistake that we always do, to assume that we are more important. Yes, we are. If we to speak of creation, we are more important than the other creatures, but we must acknowledge that our very existence is also dependent on whether other ecosystems are thriving. If the ecosystems don't thrive, or if there is a challenge with nature as a whole, then we are equally affected as humans, because our existence is solely dependent on the fact that other creatures are also thriving.
Yes. Now, on the concept of the fact that we are more important, yes, we are more important. Yes. We were created on the 7th day.
Oh, yes.
At the end, we were saved for last. So, yes, now I pick that, yes, wildlife is really important. But as humans, we are also equally important. True. And for us to survive, we also need our wildlife to survive as well. So, how do you think humans are contributing to destroying wildlife, really?
In the context of human versus wildlife, there's nothing to deny that humans, we are the drivers or the leading causes of biodiversity loss and destruction because of our activities and how they impact nature as a whole. We cannot deny the fact that we were bestowed with the responsibility to take charge of nature and conserve nature, but somehow we are falling short of that responsibility, probably because of the urge that we need to be civilized and develop. And the challenge is that even when we get where we want to be, we still thirst for more.
Yes.
A number of factors that could be contributing towards biodiversity loss that relate to human activities.
Yes.
To start with, our own way of life.
Yes.
Yeah. we want to, human needs, I do not know the philosophy behind that, but for some reason, our needs as humans cannot be satisfied. And we always want more and more and more and more and more on the expense of the biodiversity that is not increasing, or on the planet that is static, because much as we ask for more, our resources, or the speed at which our resources can serve our interest, our needs or our wants outweigh the rate at which our ecosystems can serve us. So I think that's where the whole problem originates from habitat destruction to poaching, to illegal wildlife trade, to destruction of habitats and everything. It all stems from the fact that our needs and wants are not meeting the rate at which the ecosystems can actually serve us as humans.
Okay, so now I understand that, yes, as humans, we are struggling to understand that in as much as our population is growing globally, the population is growing.
True.
The last time I checked, I think we were standing at between 4 billion and around 6 billion, over there, around that range. Why do you think as humans we are struggling? We are struggling to appreciate, because yes, wildlife is dependent on biodiversity, but because of the growing population, especially in the global south, in Africa, we have been documented to be among the people who have the fastest growing populations.
True.
In fact, even in Uganda, the last census, I think we are around now 45M.
We are going to 50.
Yes.
Yes.
In the next 5 years, let's presume by 2030, Kampala alone is going to have a range of around 47M to 50M people. Kampala alone. Now, for us as Africans, our biggest struggle comes from the fact that we are so much vested into rural-urban migration, in the belief that urbanization and urban places are the only sources of survival for us. So why do you think, what underlying context do you think makes us as humans fail to understand that the moment we continue with amplifying biodiversity loss, cutting down trees to get energy, clearing swamps and trees for settlement, we are going to equally impact wildlife survival, and that it's progressively increasing the margin of endangered species or threatened species? Why do you think as humans we struggle a lot with this, really?
It's a two-way. On the other side, it's our fault, but on the other side, it's actually entirely not our fault. I'll tell you why. It's very, very difficult to convince someone upcountry that they should abandon their only survival source for purposes of conservation without offering them an alternative.
Yes.
I'll start from, for example, cutting down trees for charcoal. We understand very well that in Uganda, our main source of energy for domestic use is actually charcoal, especially in the rural areas. Now, before you tell people to stop cutting down trees, you should give them an alternative. And the challenge has always been that our alternatives are limited.
Yes.
Either we are not doing enough in terms of technological advancement or empowering our communities to be able to afford clean energy, or there is a policy gap. So while humans are struggling to, I know for the fact that there are communities which have had the chance to be sensitized and to know that biodiversity is equally important, but despite that, they still find themselves caught in choosing between livelihoods and survival and giving conservation or wildlife a chance.
Yes.
So the gap there, the challenge there is that our global governments, or even our national governments, or our leadership has not taken keen interest or the initiative, despite the fact that there are all these other policies and international agreements and whatever talk about the national biodiversity strategy and plan, the second one that runs from 2015-2025. Still, we are still grappling with the challenge of biodiversity loss.
Yes.
Regardless of all the institutional arrangements that are there and the legal provisions that are there to protect biodiversity. For me, in my opinion, I think we are failing to strike a balance between our own personal behaviors and our quest to champion the development or to grow our communities or to grow our economies. Because if we are going to follow the trend the way it is going, we are on a very wrong trend.
Yes.
the question then comes, what do we do?
Yes.
Because we have lamented.
Yes.
That's for a fact. We have lamented and nothing seems to be changing. I find it frightening to realize that as humans, we are going to be the only species on this planet that is responsible for its own extinction.
Yes.
Because we're really so much obsessed with bettering our lives on the expense of destroying the planet.
Yes.
So for me, to start with, it's on us as a person, you as Grace.
Yes.
As an individual, your individual actions. I think that's where we should start from. Because we can all agree that the institutions are not actually performing to the extent that we would have thought that they should. That's not to say that they're not doing enough. There are a lot of good things that they are doing, but it's a mix of both negative and positive trends.
Yes.
So on our side, before even expect much from the leadership or from the powers that be, what are you doing as an individual, as gross? And that's why in conservation education, we normally focus too much on changing behaviors and attitudes of individuals, because we believe that if the communities or if the population can be sensitized, if they can be aware that their actions impact the environment in way A, B, C, and D, and if they can adjust, then we have a starting point.
Yes. As someone within this space, I have noticed that when we discuss the impact of climate change, the impact of biodiversity loss, we tend to centralize and focus the discussion more on how it is going to affect us as humans.
Yes.
We don't seem to root the discussion into how it also affects animals, how it affects wildlife, and in turn, because it is affecting wildlife, it's equally coming back to us. So how do you think someone can best appreciate the fact that one, climate change equally affects wildlife, and because of its negative effects on wildlife, it equally negatively impacts the standard of human life?
Well, the only difference is that as humans, we have a voice and we can stand up for ourselves and claim for our rights. Now, the challenge for wildlife is that it can't speak for itself, in quotes.
Yes.
Because again, when it speaks,
violently,
like you rightly put it. Like they have always said that Mother Nature will always claim its space.
Yes.
Now, we have normalized responding to disasters only when they happen.
Yes.
Other than strategically,
I agree,
planning ahead. Now, you have spoken about climate change vis-a-vis our wildlife conservation. Of late, there is an approach that has been suggested. I'm sure you must have heard about it, called the nature-based solutions.
Yes, I've heard about it.
Which suggests that we should leverage on nature or use nature to actually combat the climate crisis.
Yes.
Other than solely thinking that we can actually base on technology to solve this problem. Climate change is basically because that our environment is no longer able to regulate itself and keep itself in shape. So if we must solve that crisis, then I would think that actually nature is the only way out. Now, the nature-based solutions approach is the approach that we can empower our communities, we can protect our habitats and restore ecosystems to thrive so that we can maintain an ecosystem balance that is suitable for both us humans to survive, but also that is going to build communities that are resilient to adapt to the effects of climate change.
Yes.
Because the climate disasters that we are witnessing, talk of floods, talk of wildfires, talk of extreme weather conditions, are all as a result of ecosystems not being able to withstand the changes that are coming due to climate change. And therefore, not being able to withstand that, the ecosystems collapse. That's why people on the coastlines, they are no mangroves. They can no longer hold back the tides and the waves when they strike. That's why, because we have destroyed riverbanks, the floods, when they hit, they literally burst out and reach to communities and destroy life and property. So the whole thing comes back to nature. It comes back to biodiversity conservation. If we must fight this crisis, we must be able and willing to take a bold stand and say, let's use a nature-based approach so that we can be able to combat this crisis. Of course, not saying that the technological aspect is not important, but it must complement the nature aspect, because that's where the problem stems from.
Yes. Yes. Now, at the point, you've actually raised a very important point about nature-based solutions, because I think the most important aspect about nature-based solutions is that, one, they are readily available and they are affordable. They are solutions from within our surroundings and nature. So we leverage nature to save nature. So now, on that point of getting solutions to deal with this crisis at the expense of destroying wildlife, and the fact that the destruction of wildlife is also amplifying climate change, which is equally getting back at us as human beings. What do you think are some of those things that humans can implement, some of those solutions on top of nature-based solutions to ensure that, one, we do not only conserve wildlife, but in the quest of wildlife conservation, we equally avert climate change? Because I've had experiences where you get into a community and let's say the pangolin, one of those species of wildlife that is
endangered,
extremely vulnerable, and the fact that it is destroyed so much and poached, and I think in fact has been a source of international policy and also court cases here and there. But people will tell you that I need to survive. You don't expect me to understand that I'm supposed to let it go. I need to survive. This is my form of survival.
True.
So how do you think, if you're interfaced with such a person, what's some of those ways you would share with them to make them feel like, yes, despite the fact that you want to survive, these are some of the other ways you can undertake to preserve nature, to preserve wildlife as well?
Or you can actually survive without necessarily indulging yourself in activities that destroy nature.
Yes.
I think that's a better way to put it.
Yes. So what are some of those ways you would share with such a person?
I think the challenge has been our approach when it comes to sensitizing communities and our population. We do too much of the do not, other than convincing people to realize the value of nature by themselves.
Yes.
It's human nature that when you tell something not to do not do this, do not do that, they would actually want to do it and see what happens when they do it.
Yes.
I think that's human nature. So to start with is actually to change our approach on how we sensitize our communities to make people appreciate nature. When you appreciate something, you attach value to it. Yeah, you spoke of pangolins because of the trade in their products. We're actually having a downward trend in their population, and they are critically endangered. And if we do not actually act, we may be talking of them as now history.
Yes.
Species extinction doesn't sound like a reality until it happens. It's like this climate change issue. There are those who believe that it's actually real, and there are those who believe that it's actually a discussion that's being cooked up by environmental extremists to front their own personal agenda.
Yes.
There are species that have got extinct. We wouldn't want to be at a point whereby you only have to show pangolins to your children in pictures.
Yes.
The way you do so, show them dinosaurs and the rest.
Yes.
A very visible case in Uganda here is of the rhinos.
Yes.
We used to have rhinos in Uganda.
Yes, we used to visit them those days when we went to UWEC, when we were younger. You mean they are not there anymore?
They are still there at UWEC, but we used to have them in the national parks.
Okay.
Freely existing in their natural environment until we had none.
Wow.
So it's you're glad to have seen some at UWEC because they were brought back to Uganda. They're actually not of origin. The rhinos at UWEC were reintroduced back to the country from Kenya. They were given to us by Solio Rhino Ranch.
Wow.
As part of the introduction efforts of rhinos back to Uganda, and others that are at rhino sanctuary in Ziwa. But you can only see rhinos in Uganda, not in the natural setting. It's at Ziwa, at the sanctuary, and at UWEC, and full stop. Of course, efforts are underway to introduce them back to the wild. But the point I'm making is that extinction can actually happen. And when that happens, it has far-reaching consequences other than the wiping out of the individual species.
Yes.
Because an ecosystem is interconnected. A rhino survives on A, B, C, and D, and there are other animals that also depend on the existence of the rhino. And that may stretch up to the point where it now comes to you as a human and it affects you. Maybe that may not be understood. I'll give you the context of human-wildlife conflicts.
Yes.
With the current changes in our climate, with the altering of habitats, with the extreme weather events, there are those ecosystems that are very fragile and they cannot withstand such changes. And when such ecosystems collapse, or when such habitats become inhabitable for the individual animal species, the animals start reaching out for softer targets.
Yes.
I'll give you an example of crocodile attacks, especially on island communities, where the increase in attacks of crocodiles to humans is actually increasing for very many reasons. We are polluting the water bodies so much, dumping waste and everything, to the point that the breeding grounds of fish are actually no longer able to hold. Now, when the crocodiles cannot find what to eat in their habitats, what do?
They go for the humans.
Because you're the softer target.
Yes.
At the end of the day, what we did thinking that it does not impact us actually comes back to us and claim our lives. So, I'll get back to the question that you asked. Sorry if I missed it. If we must change the trend, like you rightly put it, how do we talk to such a person who thinks that selling a pangolin is the only way that person can actually survive? We start by showing that person how relevant the pangolin is to him, or how beneficial it can be. It may not be the pangolin itself, but maybe wildlife in general. And that's why we are speaking more of empowering local communities through ecotourism projects. There are model projects that have happened in Uganda and they have really succeeded. I'll give you an example of Chibale National Park, the Bigodi community.
Yes.
It's a really empowered community and a model and a testament that actually when we empower our communities, we can actually preserve wildlife. Same case in Gwindi, where communities feel so attached to the wildlife because they know they benefit something back from them. Through ecotourism, through the visitation of the visitors that go there and buy products from them, through revenue sharing. If we take that approach and make people appreciate and realize the economic benefit associated to wildlife, because I think that's where the challenge is. Leave alone all the other benefits of wildlife, aesthetic values.
Yes.
There is that point of economic benefit because people want to see money in their pockets.
Yes.
People have to survive. Not until that happens, they are not going to attach any value to wildlife.
Yes.
So I think there is so much that we can do, but also at a time like now when we are in the middle of a crisis, I will call it middle of a crisis because the climate change crisis is already a reality.
Yes.
It's not something that is far-reached. Now, at a time like this, when you're in the middle of a crisis, everyone else becomes an educator.
Yes.
I'll speak from my perspective.
Yes.
You are an educator because you're doing this that
Yes.
you're doing right now to take the message out there. And that's why we are urging everyone else that at a time like this, it's not anyone's responsibility to champion the change that we desire to see. It is upon all of us in every capacity. No matter where you are, you can still make an impact and spread the message.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Now, you've shared something very important, the human-wildlife conflict. And I think someone recently shared something similar about how the fact that the airport was facing a challenge, the Entebbe International Airport. Flights would have to be interrupted because of a swarm of birds taking over the airport. So flights have to be grounded for a while. So that is also, I when you mentioned the fact that the human-wildlife conflict ends up affecting humans because we are vulnerable, we are not ready, it piqued my mind in that direction. Now, at that point, do you think our policies are good enough to ensure this balance of, yes, it is government policy. The primary aim of government policy is to protect nature,
Yes.
to protect wildlife. And because of that, the policies are mainly grounded in do not do this, do not do this,
that.
do
Yes.
not,
Yes.
we
Yes.
prohibit this. But the people out there are more interested in, not that do not, but the fact that even a policy has to appreciate that this is my survival as well. So do you think our policies have been good enough in advancing the fact that we have to strike a balance in enhancing revenue sharing for wildlife, the communities next to wildlife, but also protecting wildlife to prevent the increased occurrence of a human-wildlife conflict, and also to ensure the continued survival of wildlife so that future generations can also have the benefit of seeing this wildlife?
I think we have enough policies. From the broader strategies like the National Biodiversity Strategy to the different acts and policies that speak to specific areas like the Wildlife Act, which has just been recently amended, the wetland policies. I think we have enough. The gap, in my opinion, is implementation.
I think with most things in this country, someone has said we have very good and colorful laws and policies.
We have.
The issue always comes with implementation.
I think that's where the gap really is. While these policies are very elaborate and clear and providing guidance on how you can do A, B, C, and D, there is a gap when it comes to putting these policies into practice. It could be for the bureaucratic processes that are within our institutions. It could be because of maybe corruption.
Yes.
It could be that the people charged with the responsibility of implementing these policies maybe have a different agenda or do not feel the urge and the passion to actually put these things in practice.
Yes.
And now that brings me to the kind of generation that we are. Grace, if today you got in a position, say, for example, you're the Minister of Environment, you do not have to be a technocrat or an environmentalist to take charge of that ministry.
Yes.
But at least you should have some sense of passion that convicts you to do the right thing for nature. But how do you get that passion? You're not going to get it right now when you're grown. Because how you perceive things right now entirely depends on how you've grown up and what you've grown up seeing and what you believe is. If you believe that wildlife is a tool to serve you as a human, it is going to be very difficult for me to change your mindset at this point.
Yes. But we have to try either way.
We have to try either way, I agree. But how effective is it is? We had a chance to do that when Grace was still young, but we did not do it. And that's why we're saying, can we change the approach and nurture a generation that actually is environmental cautious and sees value in biodiversity, so that even when they go out there and get into different positions or different walks of life, that still rings in their mind. I brought that in because I did mention that the challenge is implementation.
Yes.
The people implementing these laws are humans. Their opinions on how they perceive nature actually contribute too much on how hard they work to see or to create a change. So we must start with influencing people's attitudes and behaviors towards nature.
All right. Yes. Now, as someone who is within this space, you have quite experience in wildlife conservation, also merging the competing interests of wildlife conservation and averting human-induced climate change and predatory practices on wildlife. So from your personal experience and from your personal initiatives, what are some of those ways you have personally implemented, you have personally taken on to ensure that wildlife survival, wildlife conservation is at the forefront of averting climate change?
I'll start from myself as a person before I speak on what is happening outside. Like I did say, that it starts with you as an individual. In your circles, when you're interacting with people, when you hear those negative comments coming about wildlife conservation among your peers.
Yes.
To start with, can you influence your peers? And at least when they relate with you, you know that you're having an impact on how they perceive nature. but also on your personal practices as a person at home. Which kind of energy do you use? Do you use charcoal? I, for one, doesn't. So I have a plus there. Yes.
I also don't use charcoal.
That's a plus.
But I don't think I want to declare what I use right now. I may still be told that, yes, I am contributing.
Yes, you're contributing, but at
nature,
least...
because I've also been told that I'm also aware that, yes, the stopgap has been gas, but apparently also we are supposed to leave gas.
And go to more.
Yes, yes, we go to electricity perhaps.
Anyways,
yes.
it's a gradual, it's a gradual process. You did ask, what am I doing as an individual? I think for me, I would say that my biggest effort as an individual is to stand up and be the change that I would wish to see. Because I often got frustrated when I see something wrong and I know it can be fixed, but the problem is that I'm thinking someone else should fix it on my behalf. So I said, no. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to be the change that I desire to see. And that is the spirit I would wish to see in everyone. Because when our leadership fails us, when the people in the positions of power do not do the right thing, the remaining part is for us as the citizenry to stand up and say, we are now going to enforce the change that we want to see, regardless of whether we hold authority or we do not. Like the leadership center has always been emphasizing on the concept of leaders versus leadership. A leader is a human being. He can go to bed and sleep.
Yes.
But leadership does not stop. So when the leader, the individual, is not present, we should carry on the mantle of exercising leadership. And I think personally, that's something I'm proud of. That when I saw the things I would wish to change are not changing, I decided to take the mantle by myself, by founding an NGO that I hope it's going to create an impact. But on the other practices that someone can do to avert this crisis is, of course, from refusing wildlife products or things made out of wildlife product, like shoes and belts and necklaces. They look fancy, yes. There is glass attached to them that when you're putting on a belt made of crocodile skin, you feel so elevated and bigger than anyone else. I think if we start by refusing such, then we are dropping the market for them. And if they do not have where to sell them, there's not going to be a demand. Yeah. If we stop using charcoal, we are cutting the chain. The person selling charcoal is not going to have the market for that, and the demand is going to go down. If we alert our friends and sensitize our circles about how relevant this topic is, then we can be able to influence on how they live their lives. Okay. I think on an individual level.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So now, from our discussion, what I have picked is that education, sensitization, awareness is the front, the end, the start, and it's the front, the end, the beginning of everything. If we are to conserve wildlife, to avert climate change, education is the foundation.
It is the foundation.
Yes. Without it, we are going astray. We are going to see something worse happening around us.
Because you cannot fight what you do not know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So have you, in your own experiences, has this, as someone who has been into this space, who has championed education within your organization, even at the education center, how have your experiences been? Have people been receptive? Have you also interacted with people who are dismissive and completely not interested in this? Do you think it has been effective, or do you think it is actually, but it's work in progress, really? What have been your personal experiences in doing this, really, as an educator?
It's a mix.
Yes.
On the other hand, I feel so excited when I interact with someone and I realized that actually they were hungry for this information, but they did not have a chance to get that information. And when you speak to them, you really see someone who is taking keen interest. Again, on the other side, there are those who will just show you that whatever you're speaking actually does not apply to our daily life. However, I do not blame them, because that's what they believe in, or that's what they have grown up seeing.
Yes.
Being an educator, I think, calls for being very patient, because changing someone's mind and attitude, especially when they are grown.
Yes.
For the young one, it's very easy. Yeah. You can always convince them and they get excited. Maybe they can go off when they grow up. But for the elder ones, it's always a challenge. It's always fascinating when I react with people and you hear someone saying, the reason it didn't rain this month is because there is an old man who has bewitched rain and this and that. And you literally look at someone and you be like, oh yes, there is a problem that we need to address. Because if we still have such cases, if we do not understand the context of what is happening around us, then there is no way that we can mitigate that. That speaks to empowering our population. Let's empower our community. Let them know. That is the bottom line. When they know, they will take action by themselves because they are fully aware of what is happening around them.
Yes. Now, I understand. Yes, it has. You're really a passionate educator, and you're doing quite a lot in this space, and I appreciate.
Sure.
And thank you. So now the new year is upon us. What do you have lined up in your line of work? What do you have lined up in further advancing wildlife conservation?
Yes.
Wildlife conservation literacy, basically.
Yes, the year is ending. The new year is here. A lot. We can only be ambitious and pray that all goes as planned, but we cannot stop our quest for change.
Yes.
The new year, we really planning a lot at Green Totos Uganda. We believe so much in nurturing a generation of empowered young people who are going to stand up for nature and take action. And that's why next year we are going to host an incubator program for young climate leaders and educators so that we can empower them with the knowledge and the skills to exercise leadership and stand up for change when there is need. That is one thing that I'm very excited about. I'm waiting to see how it unfolds. I'm very glad to have you on board as a partner.
Oh, of course, I'm also excited
for this program.
Yes.
And we are also planning to intensify our efforts in school campaigns, outreach campaigns to schools and communities.
Yes.
To spread the gospel of conservation. Yes, I think those are the two major things that I could say that this coming year I'm really excited about.
All right. So as we sum it all up, I would like you to share with our listeners and the people who are going to watch us out there a call to action. If you within 1 minute and a few words, you meet someone, what would be that one statement you would share with them for them to understand that nature is a part of us, wildlife is a part of us, and other than destroying it, they should protect it more?
My call to action would be very simple, that as humans, we shouldn't think that we can actually thrive without nature. Our very existence is dependent on if our surrounding thrives. If that is at the back of our minds, I think we are going to learn to live a more cautious life, a more considerate approach that looks at preserving wildlife and biodiversity for our own benefit, if not for any reason. At least that alone can influence our behaviors as individuals.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It has been an exciting episode with Johnson here, a personal friend who is also an educator, wildlife conservationist. For those who want to know more about his work, I'm going to share it within the episode description so that you follow his social media handles and also find his website to learn more about wildlife literacy and wildlife conservation. And my call to action to you today is to remind you that when you wake up tomorrow morning, remember that nature is part of us and that nature includes wildlife. And every time you affect wildlife or you predate upon it, it's going to affect you not today, not tomorrow, but for the rest of your life and future generations. So protect it, love it, conserve it, and embrace it as part of your life. Thank you so much. Driving Eco-Sustainability, my perspective. I've been your host, Grace. See you next time.